In the Elder Scrolls Online Update 46, subclassing lets you mix and match skill lines like never before. So, I've rebuilt my Warden from the ground up. Welcome back, citizens of Tamriel. I'm Cal, and today I'm sharing my brand new Warden build for Update 46 in the Elder Scrolls Online. Now, when subclassing was first announced for ESO, I wasn't totally sold on it. I love my Warden, and if anything, I wanted more Warden, not less. But after testing a few different combinations, I've landed on a build that I think keeps the heart of the class intact while significantly improving my personal DPS. So in this video, I wanted to break down why I chose the skill lines that I did, share how it's mixed up my rotation, we'll of course cover the skills and sets that I'm using, and I want to share some of my thoughts on subclassing as a whole, now that we've been able to have our hands on it for a couple of weeks. Let's get into it. So my first instinct was Daedric Summoning from the Sorcerer class. I figured more pets for the Warden pet build, right? But 3 permanent pets is just too much for me. It's visually noisy, it's hard to manage, and frankly, I'm still not a big fan of the Flappy Bird or the Daedric aesthetic. It doesn't feel right for a Warden, let's just say that. So I scrapped that and started looking at other options. I really wanted to find something that felt like it actually fit my character, or at the very least the way I see my character. And I wanted to address some of the gaps in the Warden's toolkit. Ultimately, subclassing has forced me to come to terms with the weaknesses in the Warden's toolkit because this is an MMO after all, and I want to contribute as much as possible to my group. And there entered Gravelord from the Necromancer. I honestly hadn't even considered this skill line before because I've never really enjoyed playing Necro in ESO. But after revisiting the skill line, thanks to some recent theory crafting videos, it started looking more and more appealing to me. Gravelord fills a bunch of the gaps in the Warden's Animal Companions line. Most importantly, it brings a powerful spammable in the form of Venom Skull, a high value AoE damage ability while also applying the disease status effect with Blighted Blast Bones, and it provides the 2 important damage buffs for DPS characters via Skeletal Archer and Detonating Siphon, which gives me both Major Brutality and Sorcery as well as Major Savagery and Prophecy. Those last 2 skills replace the Warden's Netch and Lotus Flower, which are both great situational skills that I've used for years in my rotation, but they're not optimal or necessary for pure DPS. Detonating Siphon is a solid AoE dot that also gives you Major Prophecy and Savagery, which we usually get from Green Balance, a line I've now dropped entirely, while Skeletal Archer can be a DPS boost over Netch as it deals damage while granting that Major Brutality and Sorcery buff, instead of restoring stamina and removing negative status effects. I know Netch can also provide a short duration damage boost, but it's unreliable and I suspect an overall damage loss if you are trying to maintain that 5-second damage buff. In optimized groups, the stamina regen is also often redundant. So the result is a more engaging, rotationally dynamic build that keeps me more active in gameplay, not just cycling dots on cooldown before going back to my spammable. And in some ways, I think that Gravelord is actually a more natural fit for an animal companion-centric Warden, at least more so than Winter's Embrace ever felt to me. Now in Update 46, my character is commanding both the living and the dead to dish out maximum damage. Alright, so that covers the first skill line swap. Now let's talk briefly about my other subclass line, Assassination from Nightblade. If you've watched any of the subclass content out there, you were probably expecting to see Assassination in this video just because the passives are so good. But Wardens notoriously lack an executability as well. I'd previously relied upon either Poison Injection from the Bow skill line or Reverse Slice from the Two-Handed skill line, but I like to stick to bow builds and Poison Injection just isn't that good of an execute, and that's where Killer's Blade comes in. Powerful execute that literally takes over my rotation near the end of the fight. I of course have also slotted Relentless Focus for that sweet passive weapon and spell damage boost. I don't typically fire off the spectral arrows, but as many others have pointed out before me, the slotted bonus alone is virtually required for DPS builds in Update 46. And when I say required, I mean required if you want to maximize your damage. Both Gravelord and Assassination have excellent passive ability skills that boost overall DPS, while Gravelord in particular feels like a natural fit alongside Animal Companions. With this build, I have no trouble at all hitting the crit damage or penetration caps. In fact, it might be a little bit too easy. Now, from Animal Companions, I'm keeping a couple key skills that I've always loved on Wardens. Of course, we've got the Bear, Wild Guardian, still my go-to ultimate on both bars, Subterranean Assault, a strong burst, and it pairs pretty well with Blast Bones for big damage spikes in short fights. And then of course, the Bull Netch I will occasionally use, although most of the time I have it swapped out for Skeletal Archer. It's useful when I need the sustain, it's still great for solo builds and arena builds where you can't rely on other players to purge negative effects, or provide that sustain. This build also makes it easier for me to run dual bow now, with Endless Hail and Poison Injection on my back bar for the self-refreshing weapon damage buff and additional dot damage. So this build has a somewhat more complex asymmetrical rotation, which I have been loving. In an optimal rotation, you're trying to balance the following: using Blast Bones every 3rd or 4th cast, timing Sub Assault to sneak in every 7th cast or so, keeping Venom Skull rolling as your main spammable, especially when its supercharged 3rd cast is ready, and then of course refreshing dots like Detonating Siphon, Skeletal Archer, Endless Hail, and Poison Injection when they're ready. With my build, both Endless Hail and Skeletal Archer increase in damage over time, so you don't want to refresh them early, while Detonating Siphon and Poison Injection can and sometimes should be refreshed early. Then of course probably the biggest change to my rotation is that once the target is below 50% health, I begin swapping over to Killer's Blade in place of Venom Skull. I'll still launch a Venom Skull after it gets supercharged by using other Necro skills, but Killer's Blade is my spammable at this point. And then when the target is below 25%, I start leaning more and more on Killer's Blade, worrying less about optimizing my dot rotation or refreshing them, as the ramping execute damage supercharges Killer's Blade. The other dots, of course, are still providing damage buffs, but I suspect there is a point where it makes sense to stop using Blast Bones and Sub Assault. Overall, it's fast, reactive, and has boosted my DPS by about 25%. Prior to update 46, I was parsing around 80 to 85k on the trial dummy, which I know isn't anything to brag about, but after years of playing ESO, I was still pretty satisfied with it, and I felt like a solid contributor to my trial groups. This new build, however, is hitting 105k, and I still think there's quite a bit of room for improvement. All right, let's take a few minutes to talk about the armor sets, weapons, Mundu Stone buff, and consumables. So, for my armor sets, I'm currently running the brand new Tideborn Wildstalker crafted set to take advantage of its powerful 5-piece bonus, which increases direct damage to monsters by 12%. This is perfect for PvE group content and a great option for nearly every DPS build in the game. Alongside that crafted set, I'm using Perfected Whirl of the Depths. The perfected version adds just a bit of extra critical chance, but the regular set works just fine too if that's what you have access to. The 5-piece bonus is still an excellent choice for sustained DPS, especially in fights where the boss doesn't move around too much, and you do want a source of Minor Slayer. I have been considering swapping my trial set over to Null Arca. I think it might be a better fit for this build, especially because using Whirl with a Jewelry Mythic requires me to use 1 piece of light armor, and the bonus penetration from light armor passives is typically wasted. For the Mythic, I am using the Velothi Mage's Amulet. My light attack weaving isn't perfect, and this Mythic is really a game changer for players like me. It boosts all of your skill-based damage while minimizing the penalty for poor light attack weaving. You still want to light attack to generate ultimate and squeeze in that extra damage when you can, but if your weaving isn't flawless, this amulet ensures your DPS doesn't suffer. On the back bar, I've got the Perfected Maelstrom Bow, which increases the damage of each tick from Endless Hail. Again, of course, you could use the regular Maelstrom Bow. Mine is infused with a weapon damage enchant to provide that self-refreshing weapon damage buff. All of my jewelry in this build uses the Bloodthirsty trait with weapon damage enchants. The armor is all traded with divines and stamina enchants, and I'm using a charged front bar weapon with the Absorb Stamina enchant. To maximize damage, you will want to use a 1-piece monster set that provides additional crit chance or weapon damage with the 1-piece bonus, but you could also opt to use a heavy trainee chest piece for a bit more health and defense. That is perhaps a controversial recommendation for group content, but a dead DD deals 0 damage, and with this subclass build, we are giving up some of the Warden's natural defense and regeneration that came from Winter's Embrace and Great Balance. For solo content and arenas, of course, you'll definitely want to use a heavy trainee chest piece for that free slot. For the Mundu Stone, the best option seems to be the Thief for the crit chance, but the Warrior should be a good choice as well. Like most DPS builds, your best food choice for stamina DPS is of course the Artaeum Takeaway Broth, with Dubious Cameron Throne as a close second. For parsing, you can use Lava Foot Soup and Saltries, but the extra health provided by the Takeaway Broth or Cameron Throne is more useful in group content. Finally, for the potions, Essence of Weapon Crit is my personal preference since it can be used to grant major savagery when you don't have an easy way to cast Detonating Siphon on cooldown. That skill does require a corpse, so you can't pre-buff, and if for some reason there's not enough corpses to go around, you now have another way to access the major savagery buff. Otherwise, just standard stamina pots or tripots work great. All around, I'm finding that I'm enjoying subclassing way more than I expected. And honestly, Gravelord feels like a pretty natural fit alongside animal companions. The skills feel somewhat thematically appropriate and the color palette is relatively cohesive. Overall, I don't feel like I've totally lost my Warden's identity. And part of that is because Warden has always been sort of an odd mix. Nature magic, frost, and animal summons never felt like a perfect fit to me. Gravelord fills some of the gaps in the DPS toolkit, making the build feel more complete overall. That said, my biggest critique of subclassing is the visual cohesion. I think we really need some class-themed skill styles. Imagine if these Grave Lord abilities looked more like spectral animals instead of humanoid skeletons and skulls. That would help everything look more unified, at least for my build. And of course, the issue goes well beyond Grave Lord. Skills like Relentless Focus from Nightblade or the Arcanist Beam can totally destroy a character's aesthetic. A red glowing weapon probably won't fit most players' vibe. And I think for a lot of players out there, that's an understandable deal breaker. But I think it's a simple fix, right? Let's get some class-based thematic skill styles that match our class themes. Color swaps or more interesting visual alternatives would make skills like Relentless Focus just feel so much better. The other thing that I'd love to see is some incentive to play a pure class. Right now, subclassing is always better. It's just a huge power boost, even if you're not trying to min-max. So there's little reason to keep to your original 3 skill lines unless you're doing it for theme or flavor. For example, Green Balance just doesn't contribute much to Warden DPS, and while Winter's Embrace can contribute more, it still lags behind skills like Gravelord and Assassination performance-wise. I'd love to see additions to the system that reward staying within one class. Maybe it's a passive bonus or a synergy or some sort of set that is unique to pure builds and boost their performance up to where subclass builds are today. But despite all that, I am really enjoying my new Gravelord Warden. Subclassing has of course added a ton of flexibility and opened up new playstyles, and it has been really fun figuring out what fits best for my character. So that's my new Warden build. Animal Companions, Gravelord, and a little splash of Nightblade Assassination. If you're playing Warden DPS in Update 46, this combo is a lot of fun and a nice boost over a pure Warden build. So I'll pass the question off to you. What subclass build are you running on your main in Update 46? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take. And if you found this video useful, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out my Discord for more ESO discourse, fashion contests, and future giveaways. See you all in Solstice. Bye for now, everyone.